Pi is one of those numbers that refuses to behave. We didn't invent it. It just showed up one day and declared, "I'm infinite. I don't repeat, and you can't make me a fraction. Deal with it." And we did. We used pi to build bridges, launch rockets, and explain the entire structure of the universe. But what if, just to make life easier, pi wasn't its usual 3.14 infinity nonsense, but instead a nice clean 3? Well, if that were the case, things would get weird, fast. For starters, circles would break. Normally, if you take a circle, measure its circumference, and divide by its diameter, you get pi. But if pi were 3, that ratio would be off. Circles would suddenly shrink by about 4.5%. That's bad news for anything that rotates. Car tires would be slightly too small for their axles, gears and machines wouldn't quite fit, and hula hoops would feel strangely off. You wouldn't notice immediately, but over time all the tiny errors would add up. Ever seen an old shopping cart with one wonky wheel? That would be everything now. Pi isn't just a number we use for circles, it's baked into the equations of physics. A simple pendulum, for example, swings based on an equation that includes pi. If pi were exactly 3, then pendulums wouldn't swing at the right speed, which means clocks would tick incorrectly, which means time itself would slowly drift into nonsense. If this sounds bad, you're right, but it gets worse. Planets and moons orbit because of gravity, and the equations that describe their motion involve pi everywhere. If pi were suddenly 3, the moon's orbit would shift just a tiny bit. At first, not much would change, but over time, those small errors would stack up, and the moon could drift away or crash into Earth. Either way, it's not ideal. Meanwhile, GPS satellites, which rely on precise orbital calculations, would start drifting out of sync. Your phone's map app? Useless. You'd be trying to get to work and end up in a lake. But let's not stop at breaking clocks and losing the moon. Let's break the entire universe. Einstein's theory of relativity, the thing that explains gravity, black holes, and why time slows down near your fridge at midnight, relies on pi. If pi were 3, space and time would curve slightly differently. The way light bends around stars? Off. The structure of galaxies? Wrong. The equations that describe the Big Bang? Broken. In fact, if pi were always 3, the early universe might have expanded differently, meaning atoms might not have formed properly, meaning we might not even exist. And that's the most interesting part. Pi isn't a law we wrote down. It's just how the universe works. It comes from the very definition of a circle. The only way pi could be 3 is if space itself were warped in a way that fundamentally changed geometry. There's actually a place where something like this happens: curved space. On a sphere, for example, you can draw a circle where the circumference is different from what you would expect. In extreme cases, it could even be 3 times the diameter. But that's not the kind of curvature Einstein was talking about. Space-time is curved, yes, but it's not curved in a way that messes with circles. If it were, we wouldn't just have a different value of pi, we'd have a completely different universe. So, if pi were exactly 3, the real question isn't what would happen, but what kind of alien geometry nightmare universe are we even living in? And if that were the case, honestly, a few weird hula hoops would be the least of our problems.